The Case of the Whispering Shadows. It was a foggy evening in London, and the gas lamps cast eerie shadows along the cobblestone streets. Sherlock Holmes sat in his armchair at 221 B. Baker Street, his keen eyes fixed on the flickering fire. Dr. John Watson, his loyal friend and biographer, was engrossed in a medical journal when a sharp knock on the door broke the silence. "Come in," Holmes called, his voice as calm as ever. The door creaked open to reveal a tall, thin man with an air of desperation about him. His eyes darted nervously around the room before settling on Holmes. "Mr. Holmes, you must help me," the man exclaimed, wringing his hands. "Calm yourself, sir," Holmes replied, gesturing for him to take a seat. "Begin at the beginning and tell us everything." The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Harold Abernathy, a banker, explained that he had been receiving mysterious notes for the past week. Each note was more threatening than the last, and the final one, delivered that very day, warned that he would not live to see the next dawn. Holmes took the notes and examined them closely. They were written in a spidery hand, and the ink appeared to be smeared deliberately to avoid identification. "Tell me, Mr. Abernathy," Holmes said, his eyes narrowing. "Have you made any enemies recently? Anyone who might wish you harm?" Abernathy shook his head vigorously. "No, Mr. Holmes. I am a simple man with no known enemies." Holmes leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Watson, fetch my coat. We shall accompany Mr. Abernathy to his home." They arrived at Abernathy's grand residence, a mansion on the outskirts of London. As they entered, Holmes's sharp eyes took in every detail: the high ceilings, the expensive furniture, the intricate Persian rugs. "Have you noticed anyone unusual around your home, Mr. Abernathy?" Holmes asked, his gaze scanning the room. "No, Mr. Holmes, though I have not been particularly observant," Abernathy admitted. Holmes nodded and motioned for Abernathy to lead them to his study. As they approached the door, a faint rustling sound caught Holmes's attention. He held up a hand, signaling for silence. "Stay here," he whispered, drawing his revolver. Watson and Abernathy watched as Holmes crept towards the sound. In the dim light, Holmes saw a shadowy figure moving near the bookcase. He lunged forward, grabbing the intruder's arm and pulling him into the light. "Who are you?" Holmes demanded. The man struggled briefly before sagging in defeat. "My name is Arthur Crowley," he muttered. "I meant no harm." Holmes's eyes flashed with recognition. "Crowley, the master forger, what are you doing here?" Crowley sighed. "I was hired to write those notes and place them where Mr. Abernathy would find them." "And who hired you?" Holmes pressed. "I don't know his name," Crowley replied. "He wore a mask and paid me handsomely for my services." Holmes turned to Abernathy, who was pale and trembling. "Mr. Abernathy, I believe you are in grave danger. Crowley, you will stay with us until we can sort this out." As they interrogated Crowley further, a new piece of the puzzle emerged. The man who hired Crowley had mentioned a hidden safe in Abernathy's study, one that even Abernathy himself was unaware of. Holmes began to search the study meticulously. After several minutes, he found a hidden panel behind a painting. Inside, there was a small, ornate safe. Holmes picked the lock with ease and opened it to reveal a stack of documents and a strange, ornate key. "These documents," Holmes said, scanning them quickly, "are deeds to several properties. It appears, Mr. Abernathy, that you own more than you were aware of." Abernathy looked bewildered. "I had no idea, Mr. Holmes." Holmes continued, "And this key? It seems to match the description of a key to a safe deposit box. I believe the person behind this is after something much more valuable than your life." Before they could ponder further, the lights flickered and went out. In the sudden darkness, there was a scuffle, and Crowley cried out. "Holmes!" Watson shouted. Holmes struck a match, illuminating the room just in time to see a masked man fleeing through a secret passage. "After him!" Holmes yelled, and they gave chase through the narrow, twisting corridors beneath the mansion. The pursuit led them to the River Thames, where the masked man boarded a small boat. Holmes and Watson were not far behind, commandeering a rowboat and giving chase. The fog on the river was thick, making it difficult to see. Holmes's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of the masked man struggling with a heavy chest. As they closed in, the man tipped the chest into the water and jumped overboard, disappearing into the fog. Holmes and Watson managed to retrieve the chest. When they opened it, they found it filled with gold coins and priceless jewels. It seems Mr. Abernathy's unknown benefactor had hidden a fortune in his home, Holmes mused, and someone else was very eager to claim it. The case wrapped up neatly. Abernathy was grateful for Holmes's intervention and the return of his hidden fortune. Crowley was handed over to the authorities, and the masked man was never seen again. Back at 221B Baker Street, Watson couldn't help but marvel at Holmes's deductive prowess. Once again, you've proven yourself the master, Holmes. Holmes smiled faintly, lighting his pipe. The game is afoot, Watson, and it always will be.